Well, welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. Turn this thing so it doesn't make noise at us. Appreciate you spending your morning with us early. Did you guys have a good evening last night? Did you have a good day yesterday? It was a very good day yesterday. Hopefully it doesn't rain. So we can have a good evening tonight, right? Fingers crossed. Okay. Well, about a year ago or so, I met Tim at an AMI Expo and started talking to him because my background is a clinical engineer. I worked in hospitals and GPOs and consulting groups and executive roles and all sorts of cool things over the last 30 plus years. But I currently have my own practice now. It's kind of weird as an engineer to say, I'm in private practice. But anyway, loads of fun. But one of the challenges that I run into with lots of clients is trying to do data analysis with them and process design, and their inventories are terrible. So as I walked into the expo, the first booth I see is Tim and his company. And we started talking, and he said, yeah, I see the same thing across lots of industries. So over the last year, we really had our head together and we thought, you know what, we really just need to talk about not just the how you do this, but a lot about the why. So that is why we're going to be in today, is really not to talk about either of our companies, but our experiences and how we have seen things improve, maybe little tips that will help you in your organization, and some road bumps, speed bumps that may come your way that you haven't experienced yet, but that you might, just so you have a heads up. So, as I say, we're going to cover all these areas. Okay, well, it was kind of taking a little time to let folks get in. Before we get into the who, why, what, when, how, and how not, we'll also talk about some how nots. How many of you have done a physical inventory in the last 5 years? One person, and maybe he's not sure.
I don't know what I'm doing, but
Okay, I'm like, if you've done a physical inventory, you know it. I've been through those. I've managed those. So I'm curious that you said you've done a physical inventory recently. What was the driver? Why did you do it? Right. So that's the typical. We don't know where our stuff is. We're not sure that we have it all. I'm assuming that there was some question about, do we have it all? Anybody ideas why your organization has not done a physical inventory? Like what stands in the way? Cost? Yeah. Well, as I say, I've been doing this 30 some years, and when I was a green young clinical engineer, our finance department, to your point, would look at the whole. You know, they were doing chairs and physical plant and the whole thing. It was really driven by finance, who had some sort of a rule that it had to be done. Physical inventory had to be done every so many years, and over time, I've watched that just disappear. So apparently, our finance colleagues are not driving it anymore. Although how many of you have had your finance people ask you to align your maintenance inventory with their asset management tool? Have you had that question before? Okay, I would debate that that's even possible, but I don't know your finance people. So that's always a fun one too. Okay, well, Tim and I will talk a little bit about this. This is kind of the direction we're gonna go. Please make this interactive, shoot questions out to us. We'll be asking you more questions. We got a small group here, which means we can get a good dialogue going. But I'm gonna turn it over to Tim and let us get us started in the meat of the program.
right. I'm Tim Michener. It's set up there. I was with Asset Services. excuse me. I've been with Asset Services for 16 years until two days ago. We changed our name to Inventory ID, so better reflects the services we provide for hospitals. We inventory school districts, things like that too. But most of it's for healthcare industry. But yeah, we used to get phone calls all the time saying, you repossessed my mom's car, and why did you do that? And it's like, you got the wrong company. So we changed our name to something that might make more sense of what we actually do. But so why get an inventory? I mean, what other drivers other than we just feel like we lost control of our assets? Anybody else haven't? I mean, you guys said you think you've done one or something, but what's driving that? Okay.
I work for the county, so they decided that supply chain will be inputting on the inventory. Supply chain are not biomeds.
Right.
They know how to read numbers. So now we're looking at our inventory like, what the hell is that?
Right.
You know, we even get stuck looking at our workforce like, what is this? And that's one of the things where we want to try to drive back to getting that control of us, or maybe cleaning it and try to educate supply chain for this thing.
Right. Right.
Yep.
I mean,
There's a comment over here.
yeah.
Yeah, our systems have changed dynamically in the acquisition process. We have a lot of leasing and stuff going on. But like, for instance, in our EP lab, we have Abbott contracts. And they don't really repair the stuff. They just swap it out. The next thing we know,
Right.
we've got all these
Something new.
no CADs or anything. And the stuff that's on our inventory, we're looking for it, we can't find it. So we're
Right.
trying to cancel a contract that covered it when it's still in place. They just swap it. The leasing is another thing. A lot of people get tired because they have to wait 10, 15 years to get their equipment replaced. So now they're leasing it and getting it replaced every 5 years. But, you know, sometimes they go, oh, service, that gets done by those guys. So they have to split off instead of keeping it in their operational cost.
Right.
It gets priced with these things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then next thing you know, we're having to take that.
Yep. I mean, for us, most of the time when we get contacted, it could be they acquired a new health system and they want to get everything up at the speed and on the same systems. It could be they've got a joint commission audit coming up and they're just really not sure that they've got control of everything, or they had a joint commission audit and that came up. Probably, and then the other thing recently has been more RFID. They're implementing an RFID system, and RFID system or company will come in and implement the system, but they'll only tag about 100 items to test, and then you still got 10,000 items out there that need tags put on. So they might need an inventory, put the tags on and inventory at the same time just to verify. Probably the biggest drivers for an inventory are new CMMS system. So making sure the data is good going in. It shocks me every time I hear when I have a booth and somebody comes up and they're like, oh, we're switching CMMS. And it's like, didn't you just switch CMMS like 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, but this one's not working, you know, like we thought it would. And it makes me wonder, is it the data or is it the system? If you're just downloading legacy data from the old system and just keep downloading that and keep switching systems, maybe your problem is just being brought over every time. So if you did your due diligence on the new CMMS, it should work as you planned, but it could be the data that's driving that. Independent service organizations taking over, you know, a health system. They've got to know what's in that health system. Are they going to believe the ISO that's leaving, that they're taking over, and they've got to, you know, have the right technicians with the right skill set based on the, you know, could be based on the model number or whatever, the equipment. Excuse me. So I mean, those are kind of the drivers that people contact us. I had a gentleman 2 years ago here at this MD Expo just said, we just have too many unable to locates. And I know he said, I've got about 22,000 assets and I just don't think I've got that many. Can you guys come and do an inventory? And we inventoried, and he even walked around with us part of the time. And when we got done, we found 18,500 assets. And his first response was, you guys missed 3,500 assets. So we sent somebody back out. I said, give me a punch list of 150 or 200 items and we'll go around and find those. And we found one out of that punch list. And then he's like, oh yeah, remember why I hired you guys now? Because, you know, I don't have a good handle on so he'd been carrying 3,500 assets on his ledger or in his CMMS for years that he didn't even have anymore. Just what we call ledger bloat. He's just carrying it around, and they had unable locates constantly. So those are kind of the drivers that we understand anyway. There could be other drivers as well.
Yeah, the one thing I would add in the images there, remember, it's not just about us. One of the questions when I ask folks, a lot of times they'll be, of our colleagues, I'll ask, why haven't you done a physical inventory? And they're like, oh, well, we do it every time we do our PMs. I'm like, well, you're verifying what's in there, but what about the stuff you don't know about, right? So, you know, there's that. And then there's the clinical staff that's looking for something, you know, they have their own unable to locate issues. So having a really good inventory for them is important. And then of course, you know, the boardroom, those folks, Tim's example, your example about carrying assets that are on the books. Are we paying for those in some way, right? Do we have a service contract on them? Well, you know, are we making financial decisions based on some ratio because we think we have those 3,500 devices and we don't? So it's really a lot of folks. It's beyond just, I'm going to move over here. It's beyond us. It's a lot of folks in our organizations that need this work.
What to inventory? I mean, it depends on your organization and who's got the need or who's got the driver. Like Carol was saying, could be the finance department. And our experience with working with the finance department years, you know, in the past is, I love doing HTM inventories because everything's pretty much got a tag on it and it's got everything model, manufacturer, serial number. I've seen financial ledgers that will say medical equipment, you know, Hill-Rom, and then say, you know, $1 million. And they want you to go out and inventory. And it's like, I mean, are they beds? What are they? I mean, and, or it could just say Philips, $2 million. And they just put equipment, medical equipment. And then they want you to reconcile that after the inventory. And it's like, I have no idea what these things even are. So HTM inventory are a whole lot better because everything's pretty much tagged and taken care of. We just had a recent inventory driven by actually an electronic healthcare records request. So they were going to implement each EHR. Biomed jumped in, or HTM, and said, hey, we want to make sure we're going to move to a new CMMS. Can we get, we want a biomed inventory. And then dietary jumped in and said, hey, we don't even track our dietary equipment. So we're just doing it on a spreadsheet. And then facilities jumped in and said, hey, we want, all our HVAC and building mechanical and everything thrown on top. So it could be any gamut of whatever the organization needs. I know we're more focused on the HTM side, but sometimes, other departments in the organization might jump on board and get it all done at the same time.
Or give you a boarding port, right? Like if you feel like
Yeah.
you need one and somebody else is having one.
Yeah.
Say me too. I want on too.
So, I mean, this thing exploded into every little tap and go that the nurses, on the IT side to help with the EHR implementation, but we ended up getting all the biomed, all the IT, everything. So, but basically, for an HTM inventory, it's anything that's being maintained by, your CMMS, whatever you're maintaining is typically what's inventory. So every organization is different on what they're inventorying.
How many of you guys split your inventory with facilities? Like beds, sterilization? Are you guys like, and when I say split, do you guys have those, what people often call the gray areas? So sterilizers, beds, does everybody in the room have that, or just some of the folks have that over in facilities?
We have
In facilities, yeah.
Yeah. Because every inventory we have has a different scope.
Yeah.
Beds are included, the stretchers are included, stretchers are excluded. I mean, imaging's included, imaging's not. If they lease it out or, it's not theirs, they might not have us inventory. They might have us inventoried if it's leased out. But I mean,
Right.
Every scope of every inventory. So that's something as an organization, when you do your inventory, lay it out, make sure you know exactly what assets you're going to inventory.
Yeah, and keep in mind, people say, well, sterilizers and beds are not medical devices. Actually, they are. They have to go through the PMA, 510K, all of that other stuff. And I could talk for days about how it scares the bejesus out of me that HTM's not involved with sterilizers and decontamination systems and whatnot, because it has such a direct patient impact and ripple through the hospital. But keep that in mind if you're putting the scope together, as Tim's describing, because the requirements from CMS that are then laid out and audited by Joint Commission and DNV are going to say, do you have an inventory of all your medical devices? And if your surveyor is savvy, they're going to ask about those gray areas, and you need to have a really good answer for that.
So when there's quite a few different when you do an inventory. So when should you have an inventory completed, and then when do you actually perform it? But the when is when you're obviously when you're having some type of issue, whether it's too many unable to locate, too many, you're implementing that CMMS, whatever. There's all those different drivers we talked about. I tell CMMS companies, I mean, they're bidding on jobs to implement CMMS, and I ask them all the time. I go and talk to them when I'm here or at Amy, and it's like, are you telling the client it'd be a good idea to get an inventory, because your system's only going to be as good as what they're putting in, you know, the old garbage in, garbage out thing. But a lot of times, you know, if they're bidding on an RFP and it doesn't include an inventory, they're not going to bring that up because there's a cost associated with that usually, unless you're doing it in-house, and there's still a cost associated with it in-house. So they don't like to bring it up. What I tell them, you're not doing the customer a favor. You're not doing yourself a favor when the system doesn't work because you put garbage into it, but you're not doing a customer a favor either, because they're going to run into issues with your system when you get it put in. And I just tell them, you know, just bring it up to them. It's probably a good time to get an inventory before we go live. You know, like I said, we do an inventory when they're, instead of going out and slapping RFID tags on everything. If you're doing an RFID implementation, go out there and put the tag on, then inventory that piece of equipment as well. Make sure that all the information's correct in your CMMS. As far as when to actually perform the inventory, I mean, we do it during the day while everything's going on and moving around the hospital and where it should be. And, you know, other than, you know, ORs, one of the first things we do if we go on site is we schedule ORs, we schedule pharmacy, all those critical areas for off peak times. But otherwise, we're just walking through the hospital room by room, starting at the top, working our way down, and inventorying while patients are in there and everything else. So things have to be where they're going to be during the day, not stored, locked up and stored away and things like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very similar approach. So I know there's a number of organizations that want to keep the inventory in-house. They want their own staff to do it. And I understand. I mean, all of these solutions have pros and cons to them, right? There's no silver bullet, so to speak. But it's a very similar approach that we would take in scheduling our preventive maintenance, right? Is we would try to not be disruptive to the operational schedule and whatnot. And I would say, you know, even if you're outsourcing it, just as you would outsource or have that negotiation or that conversation with a service provider for maintenance, same sort of thing. If you're gonna bring an outside agency in, talk to them. You know your organization the best, right? Does it make sense to do it during the day? Probably some areas, perfectly fine. Other areas you need to negotiate after hours coverage, so to speak. No, I really need you to do this overnight. No, I need you to be in here at 3 in the morning and be done by 7 or, you know, whatever, 6, whatever it is, right? You can do these things, right? You just, as I always tell my kids, and I've told my staff for years and whatnot, if you don't ask for something to be done a particular way, you do not give the provider an opportunity to say yes, right? I mean, if they say no, you're no worse off than you were before you started. But if you don't ask, you don't get the opportunity for the yes answer. The other thing from my practice that I'm finding, I do a lot of forecasting of replacement needs. That's a whole another topic for another day, but suffice it to say, I'm looking over multiple years. We're looking at capital, so those one-offs, the big CT, the big MR, we're looking at the monitoring systems, but we're also looking at fleet devices. And one of the things that I find that as HTM professionals that we do for our own convenience is sometimes we'll take some of those fleet devices and they're one line. It's all our infusion pumps. It's all our defibs, because that's convenient for us how we're scheduling our PMs, right? But if you're looking at fleet replacement, if you're looking at capital replacement, you need those individual assets. So we're sort of almost committing the same sin, so to speak, as finance by saying cath lab room, you know, $1 billion, right? And we don't know what it is. So when I am doing a project and I get a one line for a fleet device, I'm concerned because I cannot tell the HTM director or the supply chain director or the chief nursing officer how we should manage that fleet over the next few years, because I don't know what's in that bucket. So keeping that in mind is, yes, we want the inventory to serve our needs, but we have to remember that this is organizational data that a lot of other folks need. So keep that in mind. And then the other thing that I'm getting calls about more and experienced myself when I was in a hospital role is when you're a health system and you acquire a new hospital or 2 or 10, even if your inventory is pristine, you're now potentially introducing garbage because you don't know what they have. Maybe you get lucky, you bought somebody that's pristine too. Probably not. Alternatively, if you're the one getting acquired and you've spent hours and hours and hours to have the pristine, and now you're getting pushed into the, the landfill, right? So that sort of, this is going to be our life for a long time. As I said, I've been around 30 years. My first job, I joined a standalone hospital, and within the first year, we were merging with our arch rivals down the city block, right? So I've been in a merger environment, and it's just like every other industry. It's almost like the Big Bang Theory, right? There was a lot of that consolidation, and then poof, and then a lot of consolidation. Right now, we're in a little bit of a poof. If you look at the news, Ascension is selling off lots of their missions, I think they call it, right? Different parts of the country. Tenet is selling some of their facilities, which means somebody's buying them, right? And so that's what I'm hearing from folks is how do we handle that? Not just our PM operations, our HTM operations, but what do I do about this inventory? How do I figure out what they need from a replacement perspective and such? So there's a lot of things that ideally, if you've got a merger coming, really petition to get into those conversations. I did not have a lot of luck getting in before the whole thing was signed, sealed, and delivered. And I kept telling them, look, we're not the deal breaker. I get that. As much as I would love for us to be that important, we're not. But let me get in there so I can tell you what your financial implications are from a technology perspective. I'm hearing just in conversations in the last couple of days that it's becoming a little more common for HCM professionals, for the directors and whatnot, to have some visibility or ability to have conversations so that the two directors, if you will, can begin looking at what are those issues. The sooner you can start having those conversations and figuring out, that will tell you if you're going to need a physical inventory or if it would just drive some extra value for the organization. Cool. What's next? Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so a scenario, just to, coming from the biomed side, because what we believe in, right, is often different from what leadership kind of sees. If we were to rationalize why you need a physical inventory and also put everything on the database, medical equipment. So finance could give you say, hey, sterilizers are not, medical equipment, beds are not, we don't want them. And you had to provide reasonable rationale as to why you want them on there, at least for inventory tracking purposes. Is there any specific CMMS, Joint Commission, or DMV policies? I know there's like the medical device gray areas, but can you reference that to them?
We in facilities are the only ones that have gray areas.
Okay.
These sterilizers, beds, stretchers, those have FDA clearance numbers. They have to go through that process. So they are considered a medical device. Just because we call them a facilities device, right? I mean, that's our chatter. So yes, that goes back, and especially if you're a joint commission, because it's really spelled out specifically. And I apologize, I'm terrible at memorizing, the standard number and the EP number. I have a colleague that's amazing with that. And I'm like, what was that number? But yeah.
I was just thinking, sometimes we need to educate.
Yes.
Leadership, right?
Yes.
Different office, finance, everybody has their own skin in the game.
Yes.
We need to be able to provide that
Yes.
policy or reasoning.
Yes.
Or talk track.
Yes, absolutely. So I would reference the accreditation standards that start with CMS, which go back to reimbursement. Now, are you going to get dinged on gray area stuff? Probably not, but you might get, I forget what the terminology is today, but you're going to get a warning or whatever, or a finding. Yeah, that's, you might get a finding. And again, as we all know, it depends upon who your surveyor is and kind of where they're focused and all. But there's the accreditation thing. Accreditation rolls back to CMS, which is all about reimbursement. I would, if I'm talking to the finance person, I would not bring up, mention the accreditation, but I would focus on what does this mean from a finance perspective? Why should the CFO, the finance person, care? If I'm talking to nursing, why should he or she care? It's going to be about patient safety, making sure the gear's up, making sure we're not deferring patients, all those sorts of things. So you need to figure out how to tailor. You're exactly right. What's my talk track? It's the same story, but from like these different perspectives, right? And make sure it's all about them, because frankly, we don't matter. We do. I love all of you, and they do. But in the moment, you need to tell them what's in it for them. Great question. Others, yes.
I guess my question would be like, is it that much different in the public sector versus the government sector? Because my experience has all been in the VA.
Okay.
So sometimes in logistics, we have issues where they tag too much stuff. So like, it's changed, but like anything that's been like over $500 or whatever.
Yeah.
It would be in the inventory.
Yeah.
And then every year they would send certain EIL owners or CMR owners, all this equipment belongs to you. They give them a list. They
Right.
say, go find it. And then
Right.
otherwise they do report surveys
Right.
on
Right.
an annual basis.
Right.
And then I guess we have to still talk to logistics
Right.
a lot. Like I've always seen it as HTM is just whether we like it or not, or logistics. Like we
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
do inventory with
Right.
and be very, very involved in it. So
Right.
sometimes that involves like taking on other FMS stuff or like
Right.
inventory other things as well,
Right.
So I guess
Yeah, no, yes and no. So where do you work, Jeff? Sorry.
LA County?
LA County. So you're another government organization, right? So I think what you're describing is fairly common in .gov type organizations, in what we call the public sector. That is the public sector, where logistics has responsibility for tagging things. The tagging too much, tagging too little happens all the time in the private sector, because the other thing that I experience, and you can probably speak to this too, is two favorite examples I have. An imaging system. Some people will call it one thing. Some people will call out the table, the collimator, the generator, the this. It might have 5 or 10 pieces. Patient monitoring, bedside monitor, or the CPU in today's language, right? And 27 modules that plug into it, right? So it has 20 tags versus one tag. So I see that variability across the private sector. And oftentimes in an organization, they haven't set a policy. And so some of the biomeds are doing it, all the pieces, and some are doing it one big piece. Consistency.
Yeah.
Being able to know how you've set your rules of the road. That's why I tell people, as long as
it's your organization's decision how you want to do that. But that's one thing we clarify with clients all the time. It's like we go into an X-ray room. Is that a unit with one tag, or is every component tagged individually? I mean, I typically say if you can take that component out and replace it with a new component that's got a model, manufacturer, and serial number, you might want to do it individually.
And that's one of the arguments we have at our hospital, because we see it the same way. Supply chain sees it different. They'll see it depends on how it was purchased. So I always make the argument, because they say system.
Right.
So if they buy a monitor with a module, they consider that one. But if they buy the module by itself, it's in that threshold where it gets its own tag. So they buy it by itself, they'll tag it. But because of the monitor, they don't tag it. So then my theory was, If we buy a whole system of monitoring under one PO, technically the whole wing should be one system because it's under one
Right.
management station.
So, and yes, and that happens a lot in the public and the private sector. My recommendation is to remember that every health system, private or public, has 2 asset management systems. Ours, which is maintenance focused, technology focused, and theirs, which is finance focused. So my recommendation to them is typically have this conversation. If the maintenance team is wanting every asset because of what is required maintenance, let's tag everything. And then you, from the financial side, take the biggest piece on a monitor, you know, the frame, right? That's your tag, and put the whole financial dollar against that. Because we're not going to try to completely everyday operationally match these. But if you both have the same, if you're referencing the same tag on that main body in your CMMS, you should be leveraging the parent-child
Yeah.
relationship.
Right.
If it makes sense, like, you know, because I'm hesitating because there are some modules that even I recommend that in a 10-bed ICU, you only need 5 because you're going to move them back and forth between beds. You don't need one at every bed. So there's always exceptions, guys. There's no perfect. But it comes down to that communication, understanding what's the maintenance asset management system, AKA our CMMS, and what does their financial asset management system need. And then use some base piece to be the link between the 2. Not perfect, but at least people can do their jobs. What else do we want to add on this one? Where are we?
We're getting ready to
We are
start this
how
one.
and how not. All right.
So this is where you'll have to keep me held back a little bit. So this is where I have to go from my sales call to informative for you, because I'm not up here to do a sales pitch. But I'm going to go through whether you're going to hire some other firm, whether you're going to do it in-house, however you're going to manage this. These are some hows and hows nots and case studies, things we've run into. I mean, this is all we do. So these are things we run into all the time. So strategy and plan. Before you ever think about your inventory, you've got to sit down like we talked. What's included in the inventory? What assets are you inventorying? What are you not inventorying? Do you need to talk to other business units to see if they're all going to jump on? Because it doesn't make sense to do. I mean, it might for you to get a good HTM inventory, just keep it focused on that. But financially, the organization may say, hey, if we can get IT equipment at the same time, or we can get facilities equipment at the same time, there may be some cost sharing. So figuring out what you're going to inventory to begin with. What's the focus of the project? Prior planning is huge. I remember reading a story one time about the World Trade Center when they rebuilt the World Trade Center, how many years it looked like a hole in the ground. It just was a hole and a hole, and they were working and working and working for years because that was all the planning, all the infrastructure, all the, the analyze the base, and then after they got all that done, it was just boom, boom, boom. So it'll make the inventory process go a lot smoother if everything's laid out at the beginning. Plan on changes to the scope, but the more planning you do, the less changes to the scope you're going to have. It's nothing worse than being halfway through a project and then they say, oh, well, we need to capture this and this and this. And then you got to go back to where you were before. So get all that organized, what you're going to do. Make sure the people that are going to do it, if it's outsourced, make sure they're cleared, make sure they've got all the, they're allowed access into the hospital, the badging process, all of that. If they're internal people, if you're using your own people, now I know biomeds they're in high demand. So if you're gonna have biomeds going around inventorying, I think that's a really bad idea. But the problem becomes it's got to be somebody that knows the equipment. It's got to be somebody that knows their way around a hospital facility. But it's also got to be somebody that's not going to be called away every 6 hours because they've got to go repair something. Because if you put somebody that's got other tasks other than focusing on the inventory, that inventory is never going to get done. We had a small hospital that they were doing it themselves, and that's why they finally called us. It was a 25-bed hospital, and the guy had been working on it for 2 years. Because every 3 hours, he's the only guy who knew how to fix this, or he's the only guy who knew how to fix that, and they kept calling him up, hey, come back, you go back and start all over. And sometimes it'd be a month or two before he'd get back out there and start doing it because he'd be so busy.
Yeah.
So who's going to do it? Make sure they're focused on it. Make sure, because the other thing is you want to finish it in a minimal amount of time. You don't want this thing dragging on forever. I mean, mobile equipment's a big thing anyway, but you're going to have fixed equipment that's going to move around or be gone and replaced if you stretch that out too long.
Mm-hmm.
So good planning ahead of time. I'll kind of walk through some of the processes we use as a case study, but access is always our biggest issue, and communication. So we tell the client, okay, this is when we're going to start. Make sure we've got access, make sure we've got a good point of contact list. Who's our main point of contact at each facility? And I need a department point of contact in every department. So if I get up there to a department and they won't let me in, they don't know who we are, they don't know why we're even there, here's who you need to call in your department. If that person's not available or the department person doesn't know what's going on, we can call the main point of contact. So that communication is huge. They go in here. Master keys, things like that are important to have. One thing we do when we first step on site, the team lead will go around, like I talked about, those critical areas. ORs, they have to be scheduled overnight. Cardiac cath, they're busy all day. It's just, it's a zoo, so we might want to go in there after hours. Pharmacy, we need an escort to be in there with us. So, scheduling those, but then the typical process is start at the top of the facility and work your way down, top floor down. Oh, we got to stop at this time because we got to go down to the ORs and do that, or we got to go to the pharmacy and break somebody away. Otherwise, you're just working top down. The way we typically do it, get floor plans for the facility, start at the top, walk up to the first nurse's station, introduce yourself, what you're doing, what the process is. Are there any rooms that are off limits? Are there any rooms that are quarantined or require special gowning or anything like that? And then let them know what you're doing. And then the biggest one is ask the nurses if they got anything hidden in cabinets.
Which ceiling tiles should I check?
Right. Because we know nurses are the biggest hoarders in the world, but.
And then I totally get why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the other thing is if it's not a biomed, somebody from the biomed shop doing it, you'd be surprised. Oh yeah, I got this over here and I got this over here. Because if you're from the biomed shop, you're going to take it.
Well, at least that's what they think.
But we just say, oh yeah, it's in the, this is where it's at. So, but make sure everybody's good with where you're going. The pre-communication I talked about, we usually have them send out a communication to everybody. We've had organizations have, like, but when you log in your computer in the morning, it comes up on a splash screen. Don't forget inventory starting, or don't forget inventories in process, blah, blah, blah. So it makes it go a lot smoother. And understand there's areas you're going to walk into, neonatal ICU, walk in there and they're having a bad day. It's maybe skip that and come back. But floor plans, we take floor plans and you mark off every room as you complete it. And then you don't finish the organization or the facility until every single room has been marked off. You might have to come back at a later time and go back through rooms that weren't available.
Let me interject just real quick. Those floor plans Tim is referring to, more and more organizations have those digitally now, not all of them. And if it's a really old building, like I just had one of my students say she had to basically create her own floor plan because this building was 200 years old and nobody could find the paper. But lots and lots, because there's been so much renovation and the architectural world is so advanced, you can get these electronics. So don't feel like it's like back when I started and you have to lug around the paper. So ask for that.
The other thing is we know you're capturing mobile equipment all the time. So things are moving through the hospital all the time. So if you're going to try to capture as much mobile equipment as you can, send a team down first thing in the morning, go down to central stores or whatever you're going to call it, Different organizations have different words, or names for it. Go down there first thing in the morning, capture everything that's in there. Go down at lunch, right before lunch, capture everything that's in there, and go down there last thing of the day and capture everything that's in there. Now, how do you know you didn't already inventory that piece? Because you guys already have tags on everything, hopefully. So we put a little dot, like the little garage sale dots. We had one organization out here in California. Every year we put a different dot, which meant a different year. We found out the hard way that some colored dots you shouldn't be putting certain colored dots on in their organization. It means something different. So, so we started putting little stickers that just say, like, if we're inventorying this year, we just put a little 25. It's got a little sticker that says 25 on it, which meant it was inventoried in 25. So if I walk down the hallway and I see, if we're doing beds and I see 8 beds lined up in the hallway, I can look where the tags are, and I'll see, like, 5 already have the 25 stickers and 3 don't. So I have to inventory those 3 that don't have it, instead of re-inventorying the same thing over and over again.
Are these techniques that some of you guys use for your PMs as well? Yeah. So don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Use those.
So,
Cool.
some of the organizations, I mean, and that's kind of it. You walk through the whole facility, you inventory the whole facility, you go back through, you make another sweep, capture it. You're just looking for those inventory 25 stickers on everything. We go each room again quickly, just looking for those inventory 25 stickers. And once the facility's done and we've done a walkthrough, then we're done. Some of the case studies, I'll talk about some of the horror things. Some people want you to do the hunt and peck method. Here's our list. Here's the tag number. And we want to put new tags on because we want to match well, especially in asset management, they might have a system generated asset number from like SAP or Oracle or something like that. Well, the system generates an asset number. Now they want that tag number to match the asset number. Well, you walk up to an asset and you find it and it's got this tag number, and they expect you to either print a tag out or find a tag number in a bag full of tags and try to match it up. When all you got to do is put another user defined field in that system that'll cross-reference. I mean, my tag number 1234 matches their system number of this, and it just cross-references. The hunt and peck method will take 10 times longer to do than just doing a normal inventory. I won't pick on a VA, but VA hospitals have asked us in the past to, at the end of every day, do a reconciliation for that department. So you're working in a department, at the end of the day, they want to reconcile, and before you start the next day, go back to that and find those items that you couldn't find. Well, I guarantee those items are just somewhere else in the hospital that we haven't got to yet. So we have to try to explain that you're just going to have listed items that are going to be in a different department or moving around or mobile. So we just do this. The last project we had was pretty large, and we did reports monthly. So we did raw reports for them just because they wanted to see the tag numbers, but we typically just do the reports at the end of the project, run the reconciliation back and match it. But at larger projects, we'll provide data on a monthly basis. So,
Which is another reason for Tim's beginning points, pre-plan, pre-plan, pre-plan. Have that conversation with supply chain or finance or whoever else is going to be involved with this, and make sure we're all on the same page. And they, take Tim's and my horror stories and say, well, but what if this? So that you can get a plan that makes sense for everybody in the program.
and then a big assumption is that people, like I told you the story earlier about the system we did after that last, that we're missing 3,500 assets. Understand, and this blows me away every time when we analyze, is you can expect 25 to 35% of your assets on your asset ledger you don't even have anymore. And that seems like a huge number to me. The system we just finished, I was surprised because they were at 10% that we didn't match by tag number. So you do the inventory, and then you run the matching sequence by tag number and match, found it. Might have some changes in location, might have some changes in model numbers or something that might have been captured wrong. But you run that matching sequence, and this system they captured 90% or matched 90%, which was surprising. The interesting thing was they were going back now and trying to match serial numbers. Matching serial numbers is real difficult because there's leading zeros, there's dots, there's dashes. Sometimes scanners don't pick those up when you scan them. But it was interesting because they said their people, when they received those in and they were entered them in the CMMS or the asset management system, some of the people were entering the dashes, dots, and zeros. Some of them weren't. So some of them wasn't even how we scanned them with the scanner. They were entering them differently depending on who was working that day.
Back to having a process.
Right.
Having a defined policy and process.
Right. So they're still working through that 10%, thinking they're going to match more, just the serial numbers are not matching up very well. But expect to have ledger bloat. Don't sit there and think that somebody's going to go and do that inventory and you're just going to have 100% match. And if you don't have 100% match, well, they just missed it. I mean, there's going to be things missed on any inventory because things are moving around that hospital right and left. But there's other things that your ledger's wrong. We had a hospital system tell us that we missed an entire x-ray because they have 4 on their ledger. And we looked at the floor plans, they have 3 x-ray rooms. So they disposed of an x-ray machine, got a new one, replaced it, and never took the old one off their ledger.
Or it's wandering around in the parking lot.
Yeah. So I mean,
It's in a drawer.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's in a drawer.
So I mean, that's other horrors. I mean, not horror stories, but we get a ledger from a client, and they're like, we can load it up in our scanners as a rescan file, and we walk up to this item, we tag it, or we scan it. It brings up and it says it's this model, this manufacturer, this serial number. You know, everything's correct on it, or we make changes. We had a client that they called us and said our model numbers were wrong on some items. And we looked at them and they were ceiling mounted items that we could not get to the model manufacturer serial number. So we took for granted that the data they had in their system was correct. And we incorrectly assumed that. They had made the model, they put the model in wrong. And now they're looking at it going, that's not the model. So that was something we asked them. If we can't see the model and manufacturer and that serial number, should we just clear those fields out and leave them blank, or leave in the current data? That's a decision on your part, what you want whoever's doing the inventory to do. But we had never run across that before. So they're telling us we put the wrong data, and we're saying, well, we didn't put any data, we just used your data. Like, it's still wrong. So, but
It's just like writing requirements for a new piece of equipment, right? And I know the VA is pretty good at this. I have some students that are working at the VA right now. And it's writing a requirement statement for what you want these folks to do, the when, the how, the where. So don't skip that step. Don't skip that step when you're doing equipment. Don't do that step when you're hiring a service provider, myself included, right? Like when I'm a consultant, because I'm an old clinical engineer and I've been on both sides of the table, I'm like, no, I'm not moving forward until we clarify the requirements and expectations. I've been yelled at enough ORs and hallways to know better. So make sure you do that step, do it well.
I mean, that's all I've really got. I mean, inventory maintenance, that's once the inventory is completed, how well you maintain it going forward. Everybody always asks me, well, how often do you guys need to come back in inventory? It's like, well, if you maintain your system well enough, we should never have to come back. But
so this is where Tim and I had a great conversation, because I have very strong opinions on this. Having, like, over the course of my career, frontline clinical engineer doing projects, trying to figure out what the heck we had, all the way to the executive level, getting ridiculous, bizarre questions from other executives that don't really know what they're asking, but that's okay. Figure it out with them. We should, in my humble opinion, should be doing PM on our CMMS. So all your analyzers, all your test equipment, has to be calibrated, right? Every year, right? Right? That's a rule, right? CMMS is a tool. Okay, it's software. It's not tangible. It's a tool. We should be calibrating it. Now, some of the things that I've done over the years in the hospital, I was involved with the early parts of a CMMS conversion, actually a couple times. And when I was finally in an executive role, I told the team, we're locking everything down. We're going to define how we spell GE and every other manufacturer. We're going to decide how we define the model, those rules like serial number. Do we put the leading zeros and dashes or no? Right? We set all those rules out. And if you come to me and say, I got something that's not in there, I got a new make or model for both, I have a person. We have a CMMS administrator. And some organizations are ginormous, so they have a CMMS team, right? Who has the rule book that says, here's how we define a new model. So you as the frontline person can still fill out whatever paperwork you need, get submitted. So you've checked your box, so to speak. And this team then in an ideally timely manner says that falls under these rules and we're gonna assign it to here, or yes, we need to define a new equipment type or whatnot. And so that stays clear. And otherwise, frontline folks, we get to use the drop down. Here's my choices. If it doesn't look right, I submit it to that team, they figure it out, and I move on to the next thing I need to be doing. If you don't have that sort of luck, oh, by the way, I did always also tell them that we will absolutely have a field, a comments field, that you can put whatever you want in there, because I am never gonna look at it. Right? I can't pull diagnostics on it. I can't pull, do any analysis, but you can put whatever in, because there may be things that are super helpful. But please don't tell me that the model is Dr. Carroll's EEG. That's not true, right? And I see that kind of stuff. So, yeah, question in the back.
Do you guys use every nomenclature, is that like a system standard? I know it's a recommendation.
Yeah, I have used it personally. I have used it in practice. It makes me insane on some days because it's
Very detailed.
It's so very detailed. And so when somebody tells me, well, we use ECRI, my very next question is how many commas, right? I'm pretty sure patient monitor is sufficient. I don't need comma, like 4 more commas after that, right? Because if I put
Right.
comma EEG, commas
Yeah.
SPO2, yeah,
We
right.
developed,
That's not helpful.
we
right.
developed our standard nomenclatures off of American Hospital Association standards years ago. And we've worked with ECRI before, and there's like 20,000,
But-
different variations. But
Right, but it can be a very useful thing because they have numbers that go with the commas, right? So if you have that team that is responsible for the maintenance, the PM and calibration of your system, they set the rules and say, okay, we're going to use ECRI, or we're going to use the FDA has a very similar problem with their nomenclature. And I honestly, sorry, Tim, I wouldn't use the AHA because they don't know what their finance guys calling stuff. That's a topic for my conversation, my presentation later today. But set the rules, right? And here are the ones that you can use. And then regardless of whether you have an in-house team doing your inventory or you hire a firm or something in between, you say, this is what you call it, because it's back to consistency. And it's fine if you pick an ECRI code that has 4 commas, as long as you always use the 4 commas, right? Because back to what we talked about, why do we do this? Ideally, it's for, one, you want your PMs to come out right. Yeah, and if you're doing something by equipment, the equipment type, if that's one of your ways you set up your PMs, it'd be nice if all of the same type were called the same thing. And if it's somebody like me who's doing other sorts of analytics on that data, whether it's to help you figure out your AEM program or your staffing or your replacement forecast or whatnot, I need to be able to not have to do needle in the haystack stuff too, because like Tim, my work then is going to take twice 4 times as long because I'm having to clean up a lot of this along the way. So consistency, consistency, consistency. That's the one consistent rule, is consistency.
I'll touch that real quick before we take your question. But yeah, for us, we have standard nomenclatures because, you know, when I first started 16 years ago, it's like one guy would type in patient monitor, one would put monitor comma patient, one couldn't spell patient, it would be patent monitor. And then when you go search, you can't find what you're looking for. So ours are now, we enter codes, what we call DID codes. So like an ME0003 would be a patient monitor, and then it comes back standardized monitor comma patient, and that's how, or we get what your standard nomenclature is for the organization, and we cross-reference and end up returning it the way you do. So
The VA has done a nice job of some of this too, because I did another project about 5 years ago and we tapped into our VA colleagues to, and that's the benefit of your program office, is you have a central group. You have this ability to do this maintenance on the CMMS.
so you have a question?
Yeah.
Well, and that's a question to ask up front too, is it, are we using what's on the door in the building, or are we using what's on the floor plans?
Right.
What do you want captured? I mean, we do inventories for school districts too, and I'll see like Mrs. Wilson's room, and I'm like, Mrs. Wilson may not be there the next week or the next year. But they'll say, well, there's nothing outside, there's nothing on the floor plans, it's just, you know, so that's all they had to go by. Right. But try to standardize what you're gonna, you know, which ones you're gonna use. You can use the floor plans, you can use the door, so.
And that's an excellent question, and it actually goes beyond, you know, the inventory too, back to new techs and decisions, because the hospital I worked at early in my career, our joke was if you took a long weekend, when you came back, your office may be in the same place, but the doors probably moved, right? And you have to come in a whole different way because things were moving all the time. So that alignment between HTM and facilities and design and construction or whomever, you need to figure out what that is. I've yet to see it happen, right? Like everybody has their own naming convention or whatnot. But again, it's back to consistency. Whatever you choose, stick with it and create those drop down so that whoever's on the front line picks what's most applicable. Or if it doesn't look like I have a good choice, I have that comment field and I send it to the CMMS team to help figure out.
The last thing I want to touch on, we use reason codes for any field that's left blank. So if you can't get to a model number, you can't get to a serial number, you can't find that, don't just leave it blank. Put a comment like .DA for damaged. And so we always, I mean, because our data person, we have a dot before everything, like .CF can't find, .MT, it's mounted, you can't get to that information. But it keeps anybody that's doing your inventory from being a little bit lazy instead of really looking for it. You know, it's harder to type that in than scanning the serial number. It's harder to type that in than entering the model number. So have a reason for every field you leave blank. There's a reason why you couldn't get that. It wasn't just that the person doing it was I don't want to get it.
All right, no, I love that idea. Because again, you could do analytics on it, right? You can search and see how many problem spots do we have, and is that a hill we want to die on and do something about it, or is it, that's okay, right? Consistency, 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 right. And create your CMMS subject matter expert team. Do PMs on your CMMS. Good news is it's not a TJC or a DNV or a CMMS. They just want you to have a good inventory. Don't forget every medical device, but for your heartburn, take care of it. Maintain it. Done. Not one and done. Other questions? I can hang around for a little while. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here.
Appreciate it.
I think we got through all of them. Yeah, we did. If Tim and I are happy, I'm around through the rest of the day. I think Tim's here for most of the day, and certainly here's the contact info that'll be up on the MD